come up there. So I think we'll definitely get in touch with her next week with regard to that particular poem on Palestine. I had looked at it. It's definitely a very powerful one. So we're hoping to get a hold of her next week. Something unexpected has come up there. And that's when we spoke to Mashup about the kind of works they're doing in the Westbury area to try and uplift and change people's lives. And that's what the show is all about. Talking about changing lives, it also starts with us, we ourselves, and what we can do for ourselves. Because if we don't have the right mindset and the mind perspective, what will happen is we cannot reach out then to others. And this is where Nazia Salejie comes in. She's a life coach, a nurse, and addiction counselor. And she's been in the field of substance abuse for 12 years, providing families with the support that they require. Her approach to life is to empower people to make conscious choices, leading them to, of course, living their best lives possible, and also to spread awareness about mental health issues and how we can assist people who struggle with these. And that's Nadia's profile. Nazia has, been giving back to the community in many directions and uplifting people. And we thought it was imperative to be able to have a discussion with her this morning with regard to something that I think is very important, is how do we forgive ourselves? A lot of the times, as human beings, we tend to make mistakes and regret them. And we kind of hold on to it and not realizing what it does to us as people, and then the space and mindset that it puts us in. And Nazia is going to be giving us those tips on how to change our lives for the better. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for having me on the show again.
Thank you so much for joining me once again. And it's always a pleasure having to, tap into you and get enticed into that better space that we always look for. So thank you once again for joining me. I think on a very important, pertinent topic is about forgiving ourselves. Nazia, a lot of the times what happens is people find themselves in spaces where, they've made mistakes. And of course, we're human beings. We tend to err. We tend to sometimes unintentionally do things, and of course, intentionally. But it's how we, I think, overcoming that actually matters. So talk us through the situation. How do we even start off by trying to forgive ourselves?
So it's very important to understand that if when you talk about forgiveness, we are so easy. It's so easy for us to forgive other people, or sometimes not. But it's definitely difficult to forgive yourself, or more difficult than to deal with other people. It's about retribution. It's about resentment. It's about anger. It's about denial. So there's a lot of layers to forgiving yourself, and it's so important to go beneath, and really get down to what the core of the forgiveness is about. Is it about you making a mistake? Is it about you not understanding yourself? Is it about you making the same mistake over and over again? But it's so important. It's actually a gift that you give yourself so that you free yourself of the shackles of situations, basically.
Where does one start? I mean, a lot of the times, when you've made a mistake or you've hurt somebody, you literally sit there and hold your head and say, how do I start? Where do I start? Do you start with yourself, or do you start with the person that you've basically hurt or made feel bad? And you're telling yourself that I'm in a situation now. Do I forgive myself first, or do I go and ask for forgiveness from the opposite party?
So number one is very important. It's accepting responsibility. It's about more than just putting the past behind you and moving on. You've got to accept and show, you've got to accept what happened, and you've got to show compassion for yourself. But also you've got to understand part of acceptance is that you've got to go and apologize if the person is willing to accept your apology, or whether the person is not willing to accept your apology. It's part of accepting that you were wrong. We say you acknowledge in any kind of step work that we do. We say, I acknowledge my mistake. I know that I was wrong. And that is something that will lead you on to being remorseful, or actually showing that I am accepting responsibility, reflecting on my actions. I know I was wrong, and I'm going to correct this behavior so as to prevent the situation from happening again.
It's interesting that you bring that up. I have a question that's I think is important. A lot of the times, people will not. They're not. The forgiving part is not the easiest thing. Okay, as I explained it, but besides forgiving yourself, others find it difficult to forgive the person that has actually harmed them in some way. What sort of advice would you give them? Because if you're in a position where you say that I'm going to break this kind of pattern that I have, and I'm going to forgive myself for the mistake I made, but the next person that I've asked forgiveness for does not want to forgive me, then how would I deal with that particular situation to try and move myself and that person into a better, should we say, relationship space?
So this is the difficult part, because not everybody is going to be willing to accept your apology. And as long as you know that your responsibility in the matter is to go and apologize and state that you are acknowledging what you did wrong, and you are making an effort to make amends or to make up for it by apologizing, you have also then got to tap into the maturity of accepting that if that person does not accept your forgiveness, at least your forgiveness, at least you have gone into the situation with a mature outlook, and you are going to accept that you've done your part. Now it's up to them, but you can rest easy knowing that I apologized, I did what I could, and now the onus is on them to accept it or not. But either way, I will be okay because I've done the right thing.
And then coming into the space about forgiving yourself, which sort of steps would you take first? What is it? I always say, and we spoke the other day about self-talk and
Yes.
what it means for you, and how it can change the way you see yourself and the way you see the world, and what it does for your mindset. Likewise, the forgiveness part affects you in many directions. And I think people don't realize the importance of the impact of what it has on oneself and those around you as well.
Look around at how many people are walking around with so much of baggage at the moment. For instance, people who are punishing themselves because they are unable to forgive themselves, whereas the people that they have done wrong have moved on with their lives and are happy, and they've even forgot about the transgression. They don't even need to punish you because you're so busy punishing yourself. Now, there's something called the 4 R's of forgiveness. Number one is
Mm-hmm.
responsibility. Taking
Mm-hmm.
responsibility for what you have done, accepting and acknowledging it. It doesn't mean that you've just got to move on, move past it. Take the lesson, but don't hate yourself forever, because the nature of human beings is, they say, to err is human, to forgive divine, which means we're all going to make mistakes. But forgiveness
Mm-hmm.
is a quality, that comes, especially when it comes to responsibility. It's a part of it. Taking responsibility means I know I was wrong and I'm sorry. But the most important person you can say it to is yourself. So that's the first R, is taking responsibility. The next one is remorse,
Mm-hmm.
showing that, what, I am sorry. I've apologized. I've taken action, to show it towards myself and someone else. Whether you write it down, the whole thing that happened, and how it affected you, and why you should forgive yourself. And we always encourage people to write a letter to your younger self. If you could advise your younger self, what is it that you would say? And amongst that should be, self forgiveness. And then the third R is restoration, working on restoring your sense of self, your dignity, your relationship with someone else. Restoration is so important, but it's a verb. You've got to do something about it. And then the last R is renewal. After you've restored, it's time for renewal. But a lot of people get stuck between restoration and renewal. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean relationships are going to be the same. It doesn't mean your relationship with yourself is going to be the same. But that's the point, isn't it? To grow past what you go through.
Mm. And I agree with you there. And I like the idea that you say going past it. Because, as we were saying, a lot of people get stuck in that zone, and they tell themselves, I've done this and I just can't. And, I cannot get over this. I cannot forgive myself. But it's having to try as hard as we can to move on in our lives, to be able to get a better quality of life. And I think a lot of the times we lose the plot in life, where I think we don't realize how short it really is. And this is the reason why we need to forgive ourselves for the wrongs we've done, and move on and try and create a better spaces and places for ourselves, where we then go and, as you were saying, with the remorse, ask ourselves, how is it that we can better ourselves as people?
Yes, and if when you don't forgive, you come to a point of self-loathing, and it
Mm,
doesn't matter. Other people can do what they want. You're already punishing yourself enough, so it's not even needed for someone to come, and say, "This is what you've done, and I won't forgive you." The horror that you put yourself through in your head is enough. You don't need anybody else to do that, and it creates obstacles in your way. It creates baggage. It makes your life's journey so much heavier. The
mm,
baggage makes it so much heavier for you to go through and absolutely enjoy every single moment that life brings to you. And the essence of being human is that we are flawed, so we are going to fail, we're going to make mistakes. The sooner you move on and get past this one, there's another one that you're going to, that's waiting for you around the corner. But they say making a mistake is not a mistake. Not learning from the mistake, that is where the mistake is. So learn from your mistake. Forgive yourself, forgive other people, ask forgiveness where you need to ask for, and move on peacefully, knowing that you've done your duty by asking for forgiveness. If that person chooses to withhold it, then that's on them. It means they have not dealt or made peace and are not ready. And you can respect that, right? Maybe they're not in a place in their
mm,
journey where they can forgive you. Maybe they're still dealing with the betrayal or whatever the case is. But you've got to also understand that their journey is they're not gonna meet you at every single stop. They're not gonna satisfy just because you're ready to ask for forgiveness. And a lot of people say that just because you're ready to ask for forgiveness and you need peace, what about what you caused me? So
mm,
they sort of see it as a selfish thing. But you have got to understand that you are doing your bit, and you do it sincerely, humbly, and honestly. And of course, you accept the consequences that
mm.
come with it.
Mm. Now, so, we're talking about this, and there's a question that comes to play, where I think a lot of our guests, ask me the question time and again when we get into the conversation of things, is how would you deal with a narcissist? Because people like that always create, they create the hurt, but then they make themselves look as though they are the victims. So
Mhm.
basically, the victimizer makes themselves look like the victims, and they're not ready to ask for forgiveness because, in their eyes, they are not wrong.
So the question here is this a toxic situation that you've gotten yourself into? Because gaslighting it's called gaslighting. Where they make you feel as if you are the problem, even though they've created the problem. And you've got to
Mm,
ask yourself, is that a healthy situation? And if the environment is safe enough for you to sit down and be straight and be honest and say, look, I'm calling you out on this, right? This is what has happened, and this is how I feel about it. And the more they feel they cannot outwit you, sometimes they could try and assert more power over you. And sometimes they could accept that, you know what, she recognizes my patterns or he recognizes my patterns, and I've got to change. Because narcissism is all about power, isn't it? And one
mm,
of the tools that they use is gaslighting. It's making you feel like you're the problem constantly. And you've got to
mm,
ask yourself, are you willing to play emotional, chess with yourself the whole time? It's a tug of war. It's a power struggle, and everything
mm,
is not forgiveness. It's something else. But if you sit down and you say, I think that you're doing this, I'm picking up this pattern, and we need help. We need to see a professional because it's not healthy for me mentally, who's a stable, normal human being.
mhm,
Or I'd like to think so, but it's not healthy for me to be in a situation where I'm constantly having to prove myself, having to apologize, having to grovel, if you see yourself in that situation, it's a red flag. It's a definite red flag. You might be able to fix that one aspect, but then another aspect of control will show up in another area of the relationship, or of the interaction.
Right. So I think it's a complex situation. It's having to look at it from the type of situation that you yourself in, because as we know, people that are coming to narcissistic play with others that do that, each situation is different, and each narcissist is more powerful than the other, and their way of manipulation is very high. So would we say that in that sense we don't need to forgive ourselves, because we need to look at ourselves in a different light, to say that we were not the ones that were actually in the wrong, but to be able to also just forgive that person, in order for us to let go and be able to move on, and tell ourselves we can then move forward in life. A lot of the times what happens is people start bottling, and this is where I say is that the bottling is what harms us from a mental, a physical, and a health point of view. And of course, with COVID-19 right now, there's so many challenges we're facing. I think this is one of the last things that we need to face. But irrespective, there are still many people that I speak to that are going through the situation.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's like there are certain situations where you also have to ask yourself, why am I constantly apologizing? Why am I constantly apologizing? I'm driving myself crazy here, and then you think about, is the person ready to accept that they are wrong as well? Are you driving yourself crazy trying to prove to someone else that, you are this good person and you do deserve forgiveness and you are sorry for what you've done? But hold on. I mean, are you actually sorry? Number one, are you saying it to keep peace? Do you mean it? Because sorry is quite a heavy word. It has so much of depth to it. And if you don't mean it, don't say it. But then the other party, are you the only one saying sorry every time? Just see, monitor your patterns. And yes, life is so short. And COVID-19 has taught us, you're here today and gone tomorrow. It's brought it home literally. So what is important to you? Is it you either be right or you be happy? It comes down to that. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Because it's such a complex, subjective thing. What are you apologizing for? Why do you feel the need to apologize? And to some people, they say, are you sorry that you got caught, or are you sorry because you're really sorry? So it's so multifaceted. But when it comes to narcissism, ask yourself with regards to the environment and the person, how toxic is this getting for you?
And also, I think it's having to look at yourself and say, how much of myself can I forgive for this? Because being in a narcissistic situation, you literally are the victim. So there's not much to think about there, but to say that you pray that that particular person finds their direction and realizes what it is that they're inculcating into other people, and introducing kinds of bad situations which you don't actually need to be in. Talking about forgiving yourself, what is it that you think is the most important aspect that a person needs to sit down, reflect, and deal with in order for them to forgive themselves?
So the most important thing, and I think that people lack in this, is your ability to look at yourself and with the enough of a critical eye, to be honest with yourself, to list all the ways that you feel that you are wrong, all the ways that you feel you can improve in, all the things you would like to apologize to yourself for, and then actually making that a sort of an affirmation in your life that I will dedicate the time to sit down with myself to construct the me that I think is going to bring me to the best possible version of myself. And if that includes me breaking down through my foundation and, forgiving myself in order to improve in those areas and acknowledging that I'm flawed, I'm not perfect, that is where it all starts. It's being humble and being kind to yourself. Most people, we let the ego dictate the way. We shouldn't let our egos dictate the way, because our egos is selfish parts of us that's essentially looking for self-enrichment. But if you challenge that part, we say it's the nafs, where you're talking to it constantly, talking down to it like a parent and a child in your head. If the nafs says, no, you don't need to apologize, why do you need to lower yourself every time? And the other side of your head, would say, but you understand that you have nothing to gain from this and nothing to lose from this. You won't make yourself any smaller. You'll just have peace of mind. So it's that challenge. Sit down with yourself, be honest with yourself, list the areas of your life, list the key issues that you feel you are facing now, and what responsibility you have had in making that situation better and making it worse. Acknowledge everything that you've done, and allow yourself to take stock of yourself, and be kind to yourself in the process. But you've got to be critical. That's the point, because you're not going to acknowledge what you're not willing to accept about yourself, even the ugly parts.
That's true. And I think a lot of us as human beings, we tend to err in many directions. And it's having to look at those, should we say, setbacks, and asking ourselves, what is it? Where did we go wrong? I mean, because each one of us does err at some point in time, but it's having to learn and grow from it that actually matters.
Yes, and they say that you shouldn't feel inferior to people. You mustn't feel small in front of people. You must feel small in front of your goals. That's better, because that presents it challenges yourself. The problem is also, to what standard do you hold yourself? Do you look at people around you and think that this is the bar I need to reach? They say that, show me your friends, I'll tell you who you are. Be careful who you surround yourself with. Do not become so immersed in a victim mentality, thinking that people need to also be apologizing to you. But don't also become so submissive that you're the one apologizing the whole time. And it comes to find that sorry becomes just another word. Because you're not, you don't mean it. You're doing it to keep the peace. It's affecting your self-esteem. You're feeling worse. When you apologize, you need to feel better. You need to feel peaceful. You cannot say sorry and then you feel like this uncomfortable movement like within you, that I'm
Yes.
just saying it because I need to keep the peace, or it's never going to get better. I just have to be the bigger person and apologize, and it will move on. But self-forgiveness is a gift you give yourself to free yourself from the shackles of the situation, and those shackles can stay with you for life if you don't gift yourself the forgiveness.
I so agree with you there. What would you like to leave us with this afternoon?
I would like to leave you with the saying that I said earlier: to err is human, to forgive divine. We are flawed. We are going to make mistakes. We are going to fail and fail. And the point is to keep failing forward. We are human beings. But forgiveness is a divine gift that you give yourself and you give other people. And you give other people a chance and you give yourself a chance to rebuild better. That's not something, mistakes are not something you should turn and run away from and be ashamed of. It's gifts to let you get closer to who you are, and you can better relate to yourself and other people, and it humbles you. And that's what I'd like to leave you with today.
Most definitely some good food for thought for us to think about the spaces we're in and how we can change ourselves for the better. And then that's what it's about. It's being able to then take the best possible person that we are and go and help others out there. So thank you so much for joining me this afternoon and enticing us into having a look at ourselves and reflecting, of course, because as we know, the show is all about reflect, reconnect, and retrospect. And I think these are the words that we need to look at and ask ourselves how we can better our life. So thank you so much for joining me. It was only a pleasure having a chat to you once again.
Barakallah, it's such a pleasure. Have a good day further.
You too, and to stay safe. From myself and the team, Assalamu alaikum. Nazia Salejie giving us some good insight on how to forgiving ourselves. And I think that's what it's about. A lot of us tend to err. We're just human beings. And it's about having to look at the different situations we find ourselves in, especially from a mental point of view, and trying to better it. We're going to go for a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be back with you in a moment.